There is an island off the coast of Scotland where nobody lives anymore. An island abandoned nearly a century ago and forgotten by most. Today, I'm going to find out what's left of St Kilda. Good morning, everybody. I'm here on Berneray Island, just north of North Uist in Scotland, and I'm just waiting on the boat to go to St Kilda for the day. That's Scotland's most famous abandoned island. It's been on my bucket list for years, and I can't wait to get going. It'll take about 2 hours 45 minutes to get there, so it's quite a long journey. So I'll catch up with you on the other side. The St Kilda group of islands is situated over 40 miles from the Outer Hebrides and just over 100 miles from mainland Scotland. Good morning and welcome to St Kilda. I just arrived here on the boat from Berneray. It took about maybe 2.5 hours to get here. It's very calm today. The sea's calm because there's not much of a wind, but even so the boat was up and down. It was a bit choppy. There were people feeling seasick. So if you come on this trip, bring your travel sickness pills. So the white building behind me is the manse where the ranger lives, I think during the summer, just during the summer, not in the winter. And there are some other researchers. There's an archaeologist here at the moment, and there's some volunteers. They usually stay in the manse as well, or in one of the cottages in the village that's been restored. The modern grey buildings just behind the manse, that's the MOD. So we aren't allowed to walk on that part. We go behind that and into the village. This row of houses was built in the 1860s to replace older ones that weren't in very good condition. So the landowner paid for these new buildings to be built. And apparently some of the older people who were living in the old ones refused to move. They didn't want a new, better house. These ones were built with windows. The old ones didn't have windows. And the old ones were used to store cattle so that the cattle didn't have to share the house with people. Number 3, which is one of the restored ones, has a museum in it, so you can go and have a look at that. The other restored ones with the roofs on are being used by the volunteers, and then the rest of the village you can just have a look round. That small building behind me is known as a cleat. They are dotted around all over the island. The cleat was used for storage and to keep things dry. So this is a really stunning view in front where you've got the mountains and you've got the whole village. Archaeological evidence suggests that the main island, Hirta, was continuously inhabited for over 2,000 years. The earliest records of the population date back to the year 1697 when the historian Martin visited. He recorded the population as 180 people between 27 families. In the 1720s, there was an outbreak of a disease, possibly smallpox, where most of the population died, leaving just 4 adults and 26 children remaining. Although new islanders arrived from Skye and Harris, the population never completely recovered. It reached 100 people by the year 1800 and peaked at 110 people by the time of the census in 1851. In the years after that, the population declined mainly due to immigration and high infant mortality until it fell to just 36 people by 1930. Outside the houses, you'll see the same surnames being repeated over and over again. And the reason for that is that there are only 5 different surnames on the island. In front of all the houses, you'll see the number of the house and the names of the last people who lived here. Life on the island was made possible by freshwater springs, and for centuries the islanders survived by hunting and eating seabirds, eggs, barley, oats and potatoes. Fishing wasn't easy for them due to the harsh seas in this area, so fish wasn't a large part of their diet. Fruit wasn't a part of their diet either, and they first saw an apple in 1875, which was brought in by a visitor. Oil from fulmars and other birds provided them with fuel for lamps. The first tourists to St Kilda started around the 1830s, but that tended to be people with their own private yacht. But then in 1877, there was a company advertising trips here from Glasgow on a steamship. So after that time, more tourists started coming more regularly, and the St Kildans used to make products to sell to them, so from wool or birds' eggs, and the visitors would pay them with cash, and this was their first experience of having money. There were times when the islanders were suffering due to a lack of food and severe weather in winter, and sometimes they faced several months with no way of contacting the outside world. In May 1912, a visiting fisherman was shocked to find the islanders near starvation. They'd been through a harsh winter and no boats had been able to deliver supplies for several months. On his return to the mainland, he raised the alarm, and once the Daily Mirror newspaper heard about it, they sent a relief expedition from Glasgow. The following year, the Daily Mirror newspaper raised funds to build a wireless station on St Kilda so that the islanders always had some form of communication when needed. Before the wireless communication arrived on the island, they used to set a fire on one of the hills here so that it could be seen from other islands, and it was a call for help, basically. Apparently, on the island, they used a different calendar from what we do on the mainland. Even as recently as 1909, their new year was the 12th of January. I don't know why that is. If you know, let me know in the comments. The post office here opened in 1899, but before that, delivery of post was very infrequent and not very well organised. There was a time when some fishermen from Aberdeen would stop by here, pick up post and take some back from the mainland. But by the end of the 19th century, they had stopped coming because of a lack of cod and halibut. However, there was a good supply of dogfish in these waters. The fishermen from Scotland thought that the dogfish wouldn't be suitable for their market and that people wouldn't like it. But in northern England, there were some fishermen from Fleetwood coming for the dogfish because apparently that was being used for fish and chip suppers in northern England. So the Fleetwood fishermen started taking post back to the mainland too. From early historians' records, we know that there was no resident missionary on St Kilda until the 1700s. Before that, the islands were visited once or twice a year by clergymen from other islands to perform marriages and baptisms. The longest serving minister was in the mid-1800s, and he was very, very strict. He was from the Free Church, and he had a lot of rules about what people could and couldn't do, especially on the Sabbath. So on Sundays, they had to go to church 3 times, totaling over 6 hours in church. There was a church service every day, except Saturday and Monday. So between Saturday evening and Monday morning, all work had to stop. This is the old cemetery. Well, most of the stones now are faded and not possible to read. One of the earliest written records of life on this island was in 1697. A historian from Skye called Martin Martin came here to find out more about the St Kildans, and he wrote quite a bit about it. And he said that the women, for shoes, they used gannet skins that would only last a few days. And he also said at weddings that would be a big celebration with lots of singing and dancing. But when the really strict minister came to St Kilda in the 19th century, he put a stop to all that. There was no singing or dancing or anything like that anymore. The school building behind me there was built in 1898. Before education was mandatory, the St Kildans were taught by the resident missionary, and the first one arrived on the island in 1704. He began teaching the islanders from 1709. He taught catechism to both adults and children, and he started a library. His wife taught the islanders how to knit. The Society in Scotland for the Propagating of Christian Knowledge was established in Edinburgh to set up schools in parishes that did not already have one, including St Kilda. This society provided funding for school books, Bibles in Gaelic and paper. The children didn't have to pay for their education. In 1872, the Education Act of Scotland made elementary education mandatory for all children between the ages of 5 and 13. However, St Kilda didn't receive a resident schoolmaster until 1884. The Education Act made no provision for the Gaelic language, and the children started to learn English at school.
The white building behind me there is the factor's house. The factor was the person who came to collect the rent once a year on behalf of the owner of the island. And there was no money on the island for a long time, so the rent was paid with feathers and fulmar oil.
The Soay sheep are descended from a feral population from the island of Soay, which is also in the St Kilda island group. They are one of the most primitive forms of domestic sheep in the world and have probably remained virtually unchanged for thousands of years. They are much smaller than domestic modern sheep and can come in various colours, although the most common are shades of brown or black. They don't require shearing as they shed their fleece naturally in spring. After the evacuation in 1930, the Soay sheep were moved from Soay Island to Hirta Island, and since the 1950s they have been studied extensively by scientists. On our arrival to the island, the ranger asked us not to get too close for photos or stand in between a lamb and its mother, as there is a chance that the mother could reject the lamb. House number 3 is now the island's museum. Here you can see information about the islanders' daily lives and their houses before the evacuation, and also the seabirds that nest on the island, and the local wildlife such as the St Kilda wren, the St Kilda field mouse, and the Soay sheep.
The evacuation eventually happened in 1930 for various reasons. For several years before that, they were losing a lot of young men to work elsewhere, and also because it was the men's job to go onto the cliffs and bring back seabirds for food. So they would go down on a rope that was made with hay and feathers, and it took a lot of skill to do that. It looks very dangerous. The cliffs are over there, but they also went to a neighbouring island to catch birds there too. So once they lost skilled men to do these jobs, they were more reliant on the mainland bringing food.
After a lot of planning and preparation, the evacuation of the last 36 residents took place in August 1930, a couple of days after their sheep and cattle were taken to the mainland.
So when they were evacuated, it was paid for by the government. There were crews here to film it. So if you look on YouTube, you can actually find some very old film of St Kilda when people were still on the island. And when they got onto the mainland, the men were given jobs. A lot of them went to work in the Forestry Commission. However, they'd never seen a tree unless they'd already been to the mainland. St Kilda has no trees. Some of the families died not long after getting to the mainland because of not having any defences against illnesses.
On the island, you'll find public toilets and a small shop for visitors. The St Kilda group of islands are a significant seabird breeding location, and this is considered one of the most important seabird colonies in Europe. It's home to a massive population of seabirds, including the world's largest gannet colony on Berneray Island and the Sea Stacks, and the UK's largest colony of Atlantic puffins.
So I'm going to end my video here, just in front of some of the houses of St Kilda. I hope you liked the video. I hope you can come one day. This is a once in a lifetime trip because it's so far from Scotland and it's quite expensive to get here. And it's limited to how many visitors can come at once. So thank you for watching again, and please help me support the channel by leaving a comment, a like or subscribing. I've got some more videos coming up on Scotland, including Mainland, which is another abandoned island. If you like St Kilda, you would like Mainland as well. I'll see you on the next video then. Bye for now.